Right. It is 6:05. I will now call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. This meeting is being recorded. Cassie, do we need to officially read that statement? And if so, can you put it back up?
Hold on. I will pull it up right now. It's kind of modified because it's changed a little, but
yep.
All right, so it's just this part right here.
Great. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order as extended on June 15, 2021, with the governor's signing of Senate Bill number 2475, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found below. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the City of Easthampton website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Should an interruption occur in which the meeting ends abruptly, the meeting will not be restarted and all agenda items will be automatically continued to the next scheduled meeting.
Okay, cool.
And Cassie, actually, could you put the agenda back up? Because I can't have it up on the screen at the same time.
No problem at all. There you go.
All right. First item is meeting minutes review for the June 28th meeting. But I believe we do not have the correct quorum to approve those. Is that correct, Cassie?
Well, it's a good question. So two things on that point. And Amy, I don't know if you were able to watch the recording. So even though Amy wasn't there, she was able to watch the recording of the meeting. Mike was there and Deb was there. And then it depends on, I tried to double check with, other people who run boards in the office. And since we don't have like a set of meeting rules, we just default to the city code meeting rules, and it's really up to you guys how you want to do it. If you feel like it's okay to vote for it. The reason that there was a push for these minutes in particular is because at the last meeting we administratively and through the meeting minutes struck an understanding about the order of conditions for the 108 Oliver Street project, and they need these minutes so that they can record them with their order so that they can get started on their work. So I would like to ask if we could administratively vote on them tonight, just because they'll have to wait another 2 weeks to be able to record it if we don't. So I know it's kind of a weird situation, but it sounds like, I don't know if the other three commissioners were able to review the minutes and feel like that is appropriate or not. It's up to you guys.
Any thoughts?
I was able to watch the video, so if we decide that this is acceptable, which it seems acceptable to me, I can vote on them.
I'm okay with that.
Michael? Did we lose Michael, or can I just not hear him?
Sorry. How about a motion to approve the minutes from 6/28/2021?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Roll call vote. August?
Aye.
Whittemore?
Aye.
Teffin?
Teffer,
sorry.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, are there any public concerns, non-agenda items?
I have not received any, and my understanding that everyone here is for the next item.
All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to public hearings and meetings. This is a public hearing continued from June 28th for a notice of intent filed by Lathrop Community at 100 Bassett Brook Drive, map 104, lot 2, for improvements to the existing trail network, Mass DEP file number 1510315. Who would like to speak first for this item?
So I'm Jeff Squire here from the Future Design Group. I guess here on behalf of the Lathrop communities. So yeah, just over the course of the last couple of weeks, just have had several discussions with both Cassie. I've had discussions with agents from other municipalities, Sarah LaValley, particularly in Northampton, and some other representatives in other municipalities, trying to understand how they manage these types of trail networks and things that traverse all through buffer zones and resource areas and such. And then subsequent discussions with I guess Mark Stinson and others, is trying to figure out how to best proceed. And so, based on those discussions, I guess there's 4 topics, I guess, or 4 items on a list. I don't necessarily have any formal agenda or anything to present, but what I see are requiring discussion are, one, the existing order of conditions for the invasive management, and I think everybody would agree that the vagueness of that order and the ambiguity with how some of those meadows are managed and to what extent is a little bit outdated, and it would benefit everybody if we tried to close out that existing order however we can, and then just I'd like to talk about how what the next steps, at least in my eyes, seem to make sense. So if everybody agrees with that, the 2 conditions in there then that would need to be satisfied that we'd need the board's input on, I guess one was, and I haven't looked at these this afternoon, so I apologize, but my understanding is there's one that requires a new delineation of all the wetlands on the property. And so it's a question of whether the commission would be accepting of a request to close out the current order without that delineation. We had probably half of it delineated within the last 3 years, which are on the plans. The other, and I'm happy to share, a plan that I've got that I will use for topic later, but this shows, I can just blow in. So anything you see with a little black flag was one that was delineated, were resource areas that were delineated within the past 3 years. So there's little sections that we didn't do, this portion, in the east portion of the property. And then we hadn't done anything in the back part of the property, primarily because these were for the expansion project. And so we didn't, necessarily delineate out in the fields because we knew we weren't going to do anything out there. The delineation that's shown was from the original order of conditions for the property. And so we tried to fill in the gaps where possible. So, the question would be, would the board be accepting of a request to close out the order without a full delineation? And then also, as part of that, I can stop sharing this. The other piece of that that I understood is that they needed to have confirmation that all the invasive removal that they said they were going to do as part of that original permit have been done. And I don't know, I haven't read all the details of, that original permit. It's a large property, 150 acres or so. I know they have records from, annual reports of activities that they do associated with their, management and programs. So they can certainly provide those as record of, annual maintenance or commitment to that original condition. It's a question of whether the commission would require a new, third-party consultant to come in and determine whether, they fulfill their obligation or not. And I think, it seems like if those 2 can be determined, we can then close out the existing order and then move forward, which is the next part of the conversation. I don't know, Cassie, if you want to add anything to that, but.
Yeah, I looked at the original order of conditions for the invasive work, and it talks about, it's kind of the standard language that we use for certificate compliance, saying it sounds like what you're talking about, Jeff, with needing a new delineation. You're thinking that because one of the requirements for post-construction is an as-built plan showing post-vegetation management conditions within all the areas jurisdiction under the Act. And it says this plan shall include at a minimum all wetland resource area boundaries with associated buffer zones and regulatory setbacks. So my understanding is that the need for the wetland boundaries to be displayed was so that you guys can see, so that the commissioners can see, where the vegetation management work has occurred in relation to the wetlands. And so I don't know if it needs to be a delineation of the entire property rather than just, within the area of where the work was completed. And then, that's kind of my guess of the intent, at least between the conditions. And then for the, you're talking about like a review of the work that had been done. It sounds like you're referencing the part where it talks about a letter by an environmental professional certifying the compliance of the property with this order of conditions, detailing any deviations that exist. So it sounds like just some kind of summary of what has been completed would be appropriate, but that's up to the commission's interpretation. I was just wanted to read the order itself, and I have the order here if you guys want to see it.
Cassie, can you show us the conditions in question?
Yeah. So it's these two conditions here, part of condition 36, section A and B, and then B1, particularly talks about the resource areas. I mean, and this is something to, Jeff, for your part, or whoever submits this request for certificate compliance, that would be something that I know you want to get like an idea of what would be right. I think that part of your application would be arguing and proving that what you have is rising to the level of what's called for here. So I know that's part of potentially the consideration, but if you can make an argument that convinces the commission.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, I know no decisions are going to be made tonight, and I guess I think the most important thing would be to make sure that we're headed down a path that the commission agrees with, in the event that we need to change course or amend something, another order or something else. So that's really the goal of tonight, for us to be able to wrap our heads around what a path that the commission agrees that we're that is appropriate.
So let me ask you this: for the work that's being proposed now, that includes the crossings, it sounds like there is not currently delineation of those areas. Is that correct, from what you were showing on the map? So before, I guess, in terms of trying to think about how to separate all these parts and pieces, this is, one of the conclusions that I came to, is that this existing order makes it really challenging. So I think closing this out and moving ahead is the best sense. In terms of the trail work, I think there's other exemptions and considerations that we should look at that don't, that may or may not impact the response to your question, Julia. I think there's an exemption under the Wetlands Protection Act that allows for minor activities such as trail clearing, pedestrian trail clearing, or maintenance for footpaths. And I think the majority of the work that has been proposed in a lot of those areas are actually exempt under the Wetlands Protection Act. And so that was something that I wanted to have the discussion with you about it, just making sure that everybody agrees that that's, and I can pull up those regs, but that's, so some of those areas, in direct response to your question, some of those areas where work or improvements are proposed, yes, they're in areas where that haven't been recently delineated, such as along Bassett Brook. We didn't delineate that, high water line because we weren't even going to be close to the western edge of the property. But I also think that a lot of the work that was shown or proposed in the current notice of intent is actually exempt under the wetlands regulations. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page with that. So again, we could figure out a path forward. Well, I'm asking because if there is going to be a need to delineate those areas, then the question of needing the delineation to close this one out might be moot, because you might be doing it anyways. And that would be one easy way to clear that up.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is, I think those activities are exempt, so we wouldn't need to delineate it, regardless. It would, if it's an exempt activity, whether or not it occurs in a resource area or not, doesn't really matter because it's an exempt activity. If that makes sense.
I think it might be helpful for me to add at this point. One of the conversations that we had with DEP that I sat in on, that Lathrop had with DEP, was talking about how there's certain types of crossing structures that can be used that are not considered fill. So if they're able to financially be able to use those kind of crossing structures and only use those, then in theory, yeah, an argument could be made that it is exempt. Specifically, these kind of helical driven posts in the ground, and then there's not really anything touching the ground, that would be considered fill if that's used. So that was just like an example that DEP gave. So if the current NOI is reworked in such a way that none of the crossings create fill, then yeah, the argument could be made that they are exempt.
So Cassie,
Yeah.
that suggests that it's not an automatically exempt activity. Is that your understanding from DEP?
What? Oh, putting in a crossing or what?
The crossings, because they're these small pedestrian crossings.
It depends on how they're structured. So if you just put a board on the ground and walk over a board, that's considered fill. But if you make there's certain specifications of certain types of crossings that are not considered fill. Does that make sense? So I don't know what the final plan is. That
It is not on my recollection of the exemptions, and Jeff, what exemption in particular are you talking about? Because most of the exemptions apply to buffer zone and riverfront only, correct?
So yeah, so let me, if I can show, Cassie, if you can, this, so everybody can see that. So this is, I won't go through the whole thing. I don't know whether, oh boy, that's not what I wanted to do. So under 10.2B, it talks about activities that are, let's see here.
In the buffer zone.
Activities described within the following activities, provided that they comply with 10 CMR and this, are not otherwise subject to regulation. And Mark and Sarah LaValle and other communities reference this as the primary source for exempting a lot of their trail work in resource areas and other municipalities. That, for example, Northampton said that they permit the major projects, stream crossings, anything that is a significant, project, and understanding that that's a little bit loosely defined, but, anything that requires some construction. All the other trail work, the maintenance, the, addition of gravel to alleviate puddles, all of those types of things, they all use this exemption. Which is, unpaved pedestrian walkways left 30 and 5 for private use and less than 3 feet wide for public access and conservation property. And it, goes through to talk about other, vista pruning, planting of native species, shrubs, ground covers. There's this goes on, through a whole range of activities that are similar in nature.
But these are minor activities in the buffer zone. Once you're in a resource area, this doesn't apply.
Well, and this is the thing with the regulations, you have to, if you go into the river under the 510, 5.8 or any of the wetland regulations, BVW impacts, they all refer back to this standard as being the exempt activities. So unless an activity falls under these categories, it is subject to regulation in any of those other resource areas. And so we could go down to the BVW or any of the other, resource areas, but the way the regulations work is that they all refer back to the activities that are exempt, unless otherwise exempt under, 10.02 2B1, they are subject to regulation. And so that applies to riverfront areas, BVW, buffer zones, floodplain. They all refer back to this, this standard at the beginning of the regulations as the baseline. And I
Kathy,
recognize
it's Mike. Can we just refer back to the notes? Because didn't we talk about this last meeting with recommendations from Melissa and Dan?
We did, Mike, and the recommendation was to talk to DEP ultimately at the end.
Mhm.
And so this is kind of, right now, this is what DEP kind of steered them in this direction. And they got a little more guidance from other people who have had practice in it as well. But my understanding was you didn't make any kind of determination at the last meeting. And so it's still, I understand it's like very similar to what we talked about before, but now what they're trying to figure out is, I guess it's a number of things, but this one, it's kind of going over this specific potential exemption I don't think was discussed last time.
Right. And I guess, Mike, I try to wrap up the larger picture, and what I'm hoping to accomplish tonight is, of all the things that were discussed and presented, I think that trail maintenance and some of the trail work, a lot of the trail work falls under this exemption. I think that there are a handful of crossings, maybe 2 or 3, that would merit additional discussion to understand whether they would, rise to the need of requiring a notice of intent or, additional permitting. And then I think there's all of the meadow mowing and invasive management, which is a follow-up on the current order, that all qualify for an ecological restoration project that, if that's what everyone agrees with, we would, propose to hire a third party, ecologist or environmentalist that could provide a narrative to the commission describing the benefits of the meadow and, why we need to continue invasive management and all of the things that we would need to satisfy, an ecological restoration project. So I think, of all the things that are discussed, I was trying to separate out the different pieces of work to see which standards, which provisions of the wetlands bylaw these various things fall into. And so this trail piece was the first segment, is that if we can agree that the majority of that, with the exception of a handful of crossings, qualify under this exemption, then, that's what we will assume, and then, move on. If the commission feels otherwise, then, it would be, I think it's going to be a challenge to say that all of that trail work can meet the, absolute standards of the regulations, because it's just not possible the way the regulations read. That's why there's these exemptions.
Well, I will need to read more carefully the portion of the regulations that you're saying references back to this and see how it's handled, because that's not my understanding of how the exemptions apply.
Sure. So I could, yeah. And as we're talking, I've got them open, so I'll see if I can find sort of the standard. But I guess in general, it's trying to understand from the commission if this path, this approach seems appropriate. Because if not, then like I said, we would need to go back and re-strategize and figure out how how some of that other work might possibly be permitted.
I think as far as the mowing goes and dealing with that as ecological restoration, that makes sense. And that seemed to be the consensus from what was discussed in the last meeting, correct? For everyone who was there. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, Jeff, are you intending to submit a certificate of compliance request for the open condition? Is that how you want to move forward first?
Yeah, so I guess to me, what would make sense would be to proceed with that, request, and then follow that up with, the new, an ecological notice of intent. and then, you know, any of the other work that, you know, that we're talking about.
So you want us to, are you going to withdraw the existing NOI?
No, and that was something that I did talk to Mark about. I think, you know, I think what we would probably do is, because there's an existing file number, is, you know, we would amend the existing permit to just include those crossings that, you know, require conformance with the standards, or, you know, a more elaborate design. Because, you know, again, just to keep it all in perspective, you know, we talk about crossings, but as I understood it more and wrap my head around it a little bit more, you know, some of these are really just, you know, wet tire ruts that are in a farm, you know, farm access road that connect two fields. It's an area that, you know, they want to get across that roadway, but the extent to which, you know, it needs to be this elaborate, you know, bridge crossing on piles with railings and, you know, all that goes with it, is probably a little bit more than, you know, was anticipated. So I just want to, you know, I told Lathrop that I think it makes sense to look at those in more detail and understand what, you know, what work needs to happen, because of a lot of these are just pedestrian bridges. And, you know, it's a you know, falls within the trail maintenance piece. I don't necessarily think that, you know, that there's a whole lot more to do with those, but I think there's a couple that will require some work.
So- Go ahead, Deborah.
Thank you. Jeff, so I had a question. If mowing can be included in the ecological restoration, can the invasive management be a part of that?
Yeah, so I mean, the thought was that those two would be combined in that same, you know, application for ecological restoration, is that the invasives and the mowing would be part of that, and we would define it a little bit more and a little bit more detailed than the current order, because it's a little bit vague right now, and I think having that clarity would be beneficial for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
So what are you looking for from us this evening, Jeff?
I think just confirmation that we're headed in the right direction, that you agree that, you know, ecological restoration is appropriate for those two activities, that, you know, if we submit, you know, for example, an RDA is typically how most communities deal with the trail piece, that the trail work and maintenance and ongoing, you know, maintenance of those would be approved by the local commission, because it's under your jurisdiction really for those activities. And then that we would, you know, look at and identify in a little bit more detail those crossings that need to conform to the standards. And we would come back to you with an amended, you know, notice of intent, you know, using the same permit file number that's currently on record, to just, you know, focus on those couple of crossings and what would be the most appropriate way to move forward with those.
So there's at least one crossing that is intended to be able to support equipment.
Yes.
And vehicles, correct?
Right.
I think it would be, I mean, you're welcome to submit an RDA for the other trails separately if you'd like, but I think from the intent of seeing everything as a whole and understanding the total impacts, it would probably make sense to handle all of that as one unit. That would be my preference. I don't know how others feel.
That makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
So just to clarify, so when you say as a whole, how do you, can you just, so I understand that there's one crossing that requires, you know, vehicle, you know, access. In terms of the rest of that package, is it different than what I was saying before about just including any of those crossings that, you know, would need work?
Well, you mentioned an RDA.
Yeah.
For the pedestrian trails. I would rather look at all of the trail pieces, whether it's crossings that are both pedestrian and vehicular, or if it's just pedestrian, and see that all as one, the way it was originally presented.
Well, so that's what I was trying to say. And the challenge is that in order to meet the wetland, the standards for BVW, impacts in the wetland regulations for those trails, there's no way that we would be able to permit this feasibly, to conform to those regulations. So we'd have to separate out those pieces of work that, all of this trail maintenance, the ongoing, pruning of those trail networks is allowed under an exemption under this RDA. The crossings and any of the work would be identified in that notice of intent specifically, because otherwise my concern is that those two get muddied together, that there's no way that we can really meet all of the standards for, wetland impacts or wetland reproduction or riverfront area impacts if we have to quantify, the impact of to resource areas. And that's the challenge. And what Mark was, partially part of his issue now is that he's responding to that under under a notice of intent application, which much of those don't meet the standards.
I don't see any reason why you couldn't argue within the NOI that some of that work is exempt. And if you make that case successfully, then we would treat it as exempt. But I'd still like to see it all as one, unless you heard otherwise from DEP.
No, that's fine. I think if as long as we have some confidence that the commission will approve all of that work as an exemption, under that existing order, that's fine. I think, the only concern from my standpoint was combining too many of those different activities together, therefore, creating complication with, the other piece of it or other pieces. So I certainly agree that we could probably proceed that way if we just make that distinction in the notice of intent.
Yeah, and as I said before, I need to read the regs more closely to understand if I really feel that falls under the exemptions. Yep. But we'd like to see you make that case in the NOI when you amend it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just as a note, my understanding is that the commission can't say that they're likely to approve or not approve any future order or application, right? That would have to be determined when they actually review that application. But I think it sounds like this is I'm just kind of repeating it from my own understanding that, and maybe it would make sense in the kind of the project narrative or somewhere in this amended current NOI, really going out crossing by crossing and being like, this crossing is likely exempt, or re-arguing that this crossing is exempt because XYZ in the regulations, and this is what we're trying to do with it. And then this crossing is potentially going to have impacts. Here's what they are. And here's, kind of really clearly laying out each one. Because I get that, conceptually it's better to see all the crossings happening at once so that there's an overall picture of what's happening on the site. But then, yeah, you can just clearly say which ones that you think are exempt and you think should be considered exempt, and which ones that you think actually are going to have an impact, and quantifying it that way. Does that make sense to everyone else? How I'm understanding it?
I mean, we can certainly do that. I guess the other goal in this whole process was trying to establish a permitting framework moving forward that was very clear that, I guess my hope was that any of the trail work, whether it be any of the areas that, were mentioned in the plan, because a lot of those really aren't even crossings. They're, mowing of fields to get from, one meadow to another. There really are only, like I said, 2 or 3 that I would legitimately qualify as crossings. Most of it is, and again, if you go back to the plan, a lot of the activities are in buffer zone or, outside of, I can just bring this up again. So there's several that are, outside of resource areas in general. There's buffer zone. This is buffer zone. So that I think there's several that, are non-regulatory anyway. Most of these aren't, are just areas that are being watched and entail mowing through fields. So I guess, my hope was that at least for a framework of maintaining that trail network on Lathrop property going forward, that there would be some permit, some, permission by the commission to allow that work to happen. If there's going to be work on specific crossings and, more work, then that would be, part of a separate process, a separate application. So we would certainly go through all of those locations. I think that, again, a lot of them, I wouldn't even consider rising to the, rising to a very significant level. So we can do whatever the commission feels is appropriate. And go from there. That was really the intent of this, this meeting, is to really understand what you want, what is agreeable, and separate out these parts and figure out a way forward.
Right. Well, like Cassie said, we can only react to what's officially in front of us. And it sounds like you want to make some changes to that before we really consider it. So I think that's probably all that we can offer at this point.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, as long, just to confirm, everybody agrees that closing out the existing order makes sense, and we'll pursue that. I think we'll certainly pursue the ecological restoration piece, the meadows, the invasive work, and then we'll modify the current notice of intent application to include the trail work as an exemption, and then any of the crossings, and identify any of the work associated with those, and go from there.
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
So can we have a motion to continue until I believe it's July 26th meeting?
I'll make a motion to continue this to the July 26th meeting for the Lathrop community.
Thank you, Deborah.
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. August?
Aye.
Whittemore?
Aye.
Teffer?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Cassie, can you put the agenda back up, please? All right, we have no requests for certificate of compliance tonight. Enforcement actions. Cassie, do we have any updates on any of these?
So the only update is that we did get Commissioner August to do like kind of a quick site visit at that area and got some pictures of it. So thanks, Deb, for doing that. And
Which property is this, Cassie?
What's that? Sorry.
Which property?
For 10 O'Neill Street. Sorry.
Okay.
Where there had previously been some mowing within the buffer zone. And so we've just been kind of keeping the commission left off on it was we're just kind of keep our eye on it and see if that mowing continued or if it kind of really did stop as they had said it was going to. And it does seem like it's growing back still. It's continuing to grow back, but has not, matched exactly what was there before. Most likely. So I think we just continue to keep an eye on it. I don't know if Deb, there's anything else you want to add about 10 O'Neill Street or anything you saw.
Well, there's nothing on the property, that back area. It's growing in, but I want to say 4 or 5 feet in from the drive has been mowed. But other than that, everything else has grown in, and there's no vehicles or anything on that piece.
I can't remember the site well enough to know if that area you're describing as still being mowed was allowed to be continued to be mowed. Do you know, Cassie?
I can pull it up real quick. I'm not sure because I noticed that too, Deb. I'm glad you mentioned that because there is, that those first 5 feet. I don't know if that is within the buffer zone or not. I don't know how far out it bowed out into it. I can check on that. I can check on it now if you guys want, or I can get it for next time.
If you could check on it for next time, that'd be great, Cassie.
Okay. All right.
Thanks. No other updates on enforcement actions?
No.
Okay, moving on. Open space updates.
Yeah.
Anything to report?
Yeah, for Echodale, very, very close to scheduling a site visit with Land Stewardship Inc. There's been a lot of, they're super busy right now, so it's been kind of hard to nail it down. Potentially this coming Monday, I don't have a set time yet, but potentially this next Monday, we will have a site visit and start moving forward with that after that, because we really need to have the site visit. They want to see the site to see if the plan needs to change at all or not. Make those changes to the plan, and then we can, in theory, move forward with making it happen. So, yeah, just a quick update. I'll email you all when I have that hammered down and see if anybody wants to come.
Great. Is there any timeline for how quickly they'll respond to confirm whether the plan is good or needs amended after the site visit?
They haven't been able to give me that yet. I think it's hard to say without having seen the site, because they don't know how much they're going to need to potentially change. Because they might arrive on the site and see it and be like, wow, this is pretty similar to what was there before. There's not much we need to change. We can get that turned right around. Or they might be like, whoa, it's gotten crazy different. We're going to need like a little more time to update the plan. So it's hard to say.
Okay. Anything on the conservation restriction at Lathrop Community?
Nope. Basically, you guys, voted last meeting to recommend that it get voted on by city council. So it's still waiting on that, I think.
Okay. Compliance updates?
Yeah, I did have a few. One being, first I should say, for Loven Properties, Commissioner August completed a site visit there as well and found the site to be stable. I also got a report, though they did suspend their reporting, they were to keep sending us reports under like major rain events, and there obviously had been some. So got the report. They were saying it's stable. It looks like, Deb, when you visited there, it looked like it was okay as well, based on those images.
Yes.
Yeah. And then in theory, they're hopefully going to want to get started sooner rather than later. But I haven't gotten any notification from them that they're going to get started or back started again. And then the next one would be River Valley Co-op. So again, Commissioner August did a couple site visits recently after the rain. She was able to go when it was dry even. I did a site visit also today. And actually, if I'd like to share, I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to share the images I got from the site visit today. Let's see. Which was with Jeff Squire, so he's still here. And there are two things. So, okay, so there's, number of stormwater structures on the site. One being this front gravel area, and hopefully these pictures won't jump around too much. It's jumping around. So this gravel area that started at the front of the store, this is the main entrance here to the left. This one, it turns out that the soils are ended up being really conducive for infiltration and very sandy. So it is receiving the correct amount of water that it was designed to receive, but it doesn't really pond here. This is today and it was super rainy and it infiltrates pretty quickly down. So it's great that it's working that way, but they were thinking that in an aesthetic sense, they kind of wanted it to pond a little more. So they might do something to be conducive for that. But nothing's been necessarily decided yet, potentially like decreasing the size of that inlet or outlet. I don't know, but we'll see. Then there was, so this is that area is behind me. I'm walking down. This is some of the main reseeded area. And again, from the structures right behind me, this is backing up a little. So there it is again. So this is the first big area. It's kind of a basin by design, but it's been retaining some water. And they're just waiting for the vegetation to come in a little more better here, I think was my understanding, that once that comes in better, hopefully we'll maybe drain a little faster. Also too, I mean, it had just been raining that morning, so that one still needs some stuff.
So Cassie, have they expressed concern that it's not draining in the 48-hour period that it's supposed to drain in?
Jeff is here. Maybe he can speak to it better than I can.
So there's a number of stormwater elements, detention elements. This one in the corner is the largest one.
Mhm.
This one actually drains down, exactly as it's supposed to. It dries out. This will dry out in a couple of days.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
I think the only point that I made to Cassie and just want to make clear to the commission is that everything that you see that has been seeded, with very few exceptions, is intended to be a pollinator and a meadow mix. So just everybody needs to understand that a lot of the seed bank that was put down may not even come up until next spring, and so we're working with them to make sure that it's stabilized and that there may be some temporary seed cover just to help cover this up, but the intent is that this whole area where you see this basin now will look very much like the other side, that meadow that's over there, that this water, yes, will be standing in that vegetation, but most of it will be is intended from an aesthetic standpoint to be hidden in a variety of vegetation. So this one is certainly functioning. It works just as expected. The other one that Cassie mentioned at the front, we were hoping would during these big storms especially would hold water a little bit longer as it takes all that water. But it's interesting that there's a little sand bank in there that connects that to the adjacent wetlands, and so this water disappears really, really quickly.
Mhm.
And so there's currently, I think, a 6-inch pipe outlet in that grate. And so, one of the things that we could do that doesn't affect any of the stormwater numbers is just decrease the size of that opening to allow water to pond back a little bit, because, part of the design intent was to have this, pond after, big storms, and a lot of the vegetation was selected for that reason. So, again, we haven't decided on anything, but it's something that we may propose. So.
Mhm. Jeff, are you seeing, I can't tell with the one in the corner, are there still erosion controls at the edge of that basin?
No, not around the edge of this. Again, there really isn't a whole lot. I mean, it is vegetated. It's not, most of the water that comes into this basin is piped directly from either roof leaders or other basins. So there isn't much, there's a little bit, through this low spot that comes from, one of the gravel path connections. But that's, again, alluding back to the fact, just working with them to try and stabilize everything enough. There really isn't a need. There isn't a lot of, water that would sheet flow off to cause, erosion or sedimentation or runnels in this instance.
And you're not seeing anything after the rain that we've had that would be concerning about sediment going into your basin?
No, this water is actually pretty clean, and it's doing exactly what it wants to. It just needs more green.
Yeah, and I'll note that the erosion controls that were here, they did come to request to get those removed, and it was approved by the commission to go ahead.
I remember that about the sidewalks.
Oh, yeah, yep. And when I was there today, it had been like actively raining. I didn't see any sediment leaving the site or anything like that.
Okay.
And then if I can go through, we'll come back to that one. There was, I got an overview picture of it. The other basin. This one right here. I don't know why. I'm trying to see where my better picture of that is, but there's the larger one is back here, way up by the main road, big structure. There's one here as well. And Jeff, you guys had potential. That one was that one functioning the way you had anticipated, or was it a little different?
It's functioning the way it's intended, except that was a little pocket that, again, the soils on this corner of the site are really strange, and that we found these little sand veins in some places and others. And so this one is right along, right adjacent to Lathrop Street. The farm stand is directly across the street. This one, there was a layer of hard pan or something that doesn't allow this to draw down and drain out the way we want it to. It functions in that this is really only an intermediate basin between a lot of the stuff that it collects by the loading dock and everything else out to that front corner. And so it's just sort of an intermediary basin. All of this water eventually goes to the front corner. But there is about 6 inches of water or so that are often left standing in this little pond that doesn't drain out. And so one of the things that we talked about to avoid the presence of standing water is just filling the bottom with stone, very similar to that basin out front where the stone wall is. All the infiltration requirements, all the stormwater requirements are all met by that larger basin out front. Again, this was really more of an aesthetic. feature, a way to sort of display where the stormwater is coming in and being conveyed out to the front. This eventually will fill with cattails, and our hope was that we could disguise a lot of the open water with some stone to, cover up that 6 inches. So that may be another thing that's coming. But yeah, just wanted to alert the commission that we're aware of that this particular location, for whatever reason, just doesn't seem to drain.
Okay, and then let's see. This is carrying on that back area, some of the plantings. This is back along the co-op is kind of to the left of this image over here in the parking lot. This is the drainage that goes down in this way, kind of catches the water coming from over here. That's a big basin. So this is the other main stormwater structure. And I don't know, it seems like this one, it was, the concern before was because it was holding water, and it was during the last summer, I think, when there hadn't been a lot of rain. And now, it didn't look like it was getting overtopped or anything with this new rain. Jeff, you had said that you guys had been seeing it functioning properly recently.
Yeah, so this system here, this is a level up spreader that's connected to an outlet and sub drain that really is intended to collect water that was coming down from the hillside behind River Valley to the west, I guess, northwest. So there's no, this doesn't collect any runoff from the solar. It doesn't collect runoff from the parking lot. It's purely groundwater. And we watched this in the spring when there were concerns originally expressed about, standing water. Groundwater was really high this spring. We did watch it subside, and it dried out. It's been dry for the last several months up until this last event. So I don't have any concerns about this drainage at all.
Okay, cool. And so the last element of this update that I wanted to give was that there's been a request. This is just general. This is under the parking lot. The solar panels like right over me, or like on either side of me. It's just cool to see it in there. The lot and the erosion controls in the rear are still in place. The last request was for a potential, if it was okay with for the commission to consider allowing a suspension of reporting. And the only areas to me that were potentially unstable was this area, which the parking lot is behind me. This is where they're going to install the equipment pad. Is that correct, Jeff? For the batteries for the solar panels hasn't been installed yet.
Right.
Get a better picture. So there's this there's one stockpile, and then that kind of exposed area. Yeah, right here. So there's this that's exposed, and that, kind of extends to this lower area, and it's surrounded by, kind of a berm on all sides. And then if this was stable enough for the commission to feel like reporting could be suspended. So based off of these images and everything, if you guys think that it would be appropriate to suspend reporting or not, because the majority of the work is completed. It's just that one spot that was left.
Cassie, that stockpile, am I seeing correctly that that's immediately adjacent to the silt fence that borders the wetland area?
That's right. So the silt fence and a wattle is here. And then this is the wetland area right here. They have signage noting that the wetland is there. So.
And how long is that pile going to be remaining in place?
That's a good question. Hopefully not very long. They're trying to wrap up the solar piece of it, as quickly as possible. So it's been a complicated project. That whole solar piece of it was a totally separate construction contract, financially, contractually. And so it's been a complicated thing to manage, but I know they're trying to finish that up as soon as possible, and that, they're expecting delivery of those units anytime. So.
It would be possible to tell like weeks or months, even. I don't know if you could say even that.
I could certainly ask. Yeah, Right Builders may know more information, so I can certainly ask the question.
I mean, given the size of that pile and the proximity to the wetland, I think I'd like to see that dealt with and squared away before we stop reporting. Does anyone else want to weigh in?
Cassie, did you notice? I don't see it in the pictures, but was there where the seed mix isn't quite grown in yet? Was there any evidence of like washout of that, or is it just kind of it? I know it's just been crazy buckets rain, but just wondering if anything from that area is kind of moving down toward the road.
Yeah, I looked for that. So basically, yeah, it's not as super, the vegetation isn't super dense there, but I didn't see any evidence of like the soil moving, rivulets or things like that, or any soil that seemed to be making it to the towards towards the catch basins or anything like that. Everything it was raining really hard before we got out there. So I feel like if it had been happening, I would have been able to see it. But it didn't look like that was happening to me.
Okay. Then my second question was, did this area have any standing water areas before the construction took place? I know it was kind of like a big parking lot before it got ripped out, and then next to that is a field meadow. I'm trying to recall, because it's interesting that if there wasn't standing water before, and now you have these kind of drainage systems with these like temporary habitats for different amphibian life, I'm wondering if things are going to start moving in, which is kind of interesting. That's just the urban ecologist in me, just fascinated by that side of things.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't here before this got, I guess I was here right when it got started. I don't know if it did hold water. I'd have to see it before it happened to see if there was any holding water. Maybe Jeff or any other commissioners who've been on longer than I could say.
Everybody can listen for frogs in the spring and see.
Well, so this is one of the interesting things about this project is that, so from my experience, and I don't know, obviously a lot of the history that some of the residents might, but most of the site before was all funneled into a central drainage system and either went to that meadow or went to the road, went to Route 10, which was the other big issue we had to, deal with DOT, is taking all of that drainage, managing that all on site, and not putting any of that into the that highway system or that roadway system. So that was one of the challenges. But then, as you pointed out, just some of these opportunities for pockets of wildlife has been an interesting facet of this project, particularly with River Valley, who is very, pro environmental and just, very conscious of those sorts of things. So developing that rear pond behind Captain Jack's as a resource has caught on lately. And so I think that it will actually become something of a little bit of a, habitat pocket in the back of the market, which I think is really intriguing.
Yeah. Yep, that's all the questions that I had. Thank you.
It sounds like the consensus potentially is maybe don't stop the reporting quite yet. I'll see if I can reach out with them and get maybe to Wright Builders or someone else. Jeff, I have a lot of contacts with people associated with projects, so I can kind of just generally reach out and see what I can find out about a timeline for that stockpile, and maybe we can come at it again if I have better information next time.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. It's Mike. It's a little early, I think, to stop reporting.
Okay.
So Cassie, just reach out and see what you find.
All right, cool. I can do that. All right. Jeff, others to add? We can move on. Or go ahead, Julie.
I was going to say, if we're done, I was going to ask if there's other site updates.
Yeah, I think I have one more.
Good night, everyone.
Oh,
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good night. I just have one more. So the other one is for the school, 200 Park Street. Again, Deb took a trip down there and she got some good pictures of the situation on site. I reached out to them. Again, they gave me a reporting after the major rain events, and it's kind of ongoing there. Everything looks pretty much good to go. All the major areas that were of concern previously seem to be holding quite well. Also start setting up a site visit with them on, what day did I say it was? We're doing a site visit on the 15th, Thursday the 15th at 10 a.m. if anyone wants to join us. Just to kind of take another look, just because there's just been so much rain. I wanted to go there myself and do a long walk around the whole thing. So some of the areas that Deb might not have had access to, kind of more on the interior of the construction site, checking those and so on and so forth. So more of an update next time, but mainly just to tell you guys that we were doing that site visit if anyone wanted to come with me. And then I think that was.
Essie, do you
yes.
send out emails for site visits?
I do sometimes if there's enough time in advance that I feel like it's even worth doing it. Sometimes I literally schedule them like the day before.
Okay.
I can do that more though. One thing that would be easy for me is to send Google calendar invites. Is that something that
Okay.
people would be willing or interested in accepting? All right, cool. It's usually because I always like immediately schedule in my calendar and I can just make a point to put you all in there and send you the same thing when I'm putting it on the calendar.
Does the city use Outlook?
We do.
How about Outlook invites?
I can do Outlook invites. Yeah, I can do both.
Well, Park Street's so close.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep. I can try to switch more to Outlook going forward. One day the city in theory is moving to Google, so I don't know how much longer we're using Outlook, but that's like kind of not necessary right now to figure out. So, all right, cool. I didn't have any other updates for other projects. If you guys want to go to general business, I did have one new general business thing that wasn't on the agenda. Okay, cool. So the first one was for this in perpetuity discussion. And Deb, I know this might be a discussion that's better for when everyone's here. I don't know, but I think it's worth it to give it a try now. It's just you had reached out to me about just an example would be Liberty, the holistic property at 155 Northampton Street, which was one of the marijuana businesses that we completed an order of conditions for. They got a certificate of compliance. One of the in perpetuity conditions was about invasive species management. They're supposed to just keep managing for invasives into the future. And Deb had noted that it looked like some of the knotweed in the rear of the building was potentially coming back. And it just got me thinking, like, I don't know how in the past the commission has tackled kind of enforcing these in perpetuity conditions. Some of them that are more particularly just invasive management, if it seems like they're not doing it, should I be reaching out to them and saying, hey, keep doing it? Or are we supposed to be getting like reports after so much time? Getting reports seems a little, I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is. Potentially just kind of thinking on a grander scale. If all these properties are sending me reports, I could end up getting just swamped with reports over time, and our files are huge because forever after I'm getting invasive management reports. So I do feel like there's potentially an argument for saying like, hey, you're letting invasives like take over again, and you said you weren't going to. So I don't know. I just was curious to see what commissioners thought about that. And either specifically for this Liberty property or the holistic property, or for just in general.
So I don't think that we have had any system for really keeping track of this. But certainly if the in perpetuity condition is there, we have the right to enforce it. That's why they're there. So if we're seeing knotweed coming back up and it's clear that they were expected to continue to maintain that, then I would say probably a call or email is in order to remind them of that condition and prompt them to take care of it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think that makes more sense than just requiring reports all the time, is just doing the check and then having that be like a first stage of saying, we've noticed this. And then if nothing is done about that, then take it to a second stage if necessary. But that makes sense, I think.
For the longer term, though, I think, the way that we have it set up, the burden is on us to remember and notice those things. Whereas if we did require reporting once a year, then the burden is on the applicant. And even if we're only giving it a quick look, we can at least know that if the report doesn't come in, then we need to follow up. So it might be worth talking with the larger group about whether that's something we want to write in for future conditions.
Okay.
Can we create a structure for the report that's very simple, like of just what especially, I mean, for things that are classified under certain things, I mean, I'm kind of new to that, but thinking about like invasive species management and just saying, okay, well, we need a visual, so a series of pictures and then kind of annotate that. And then any comments that they have or something to kind of keep that file size down, like Cassie was talking about. So, but I agree that it's a good idea to bring it to the larger group.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't create some sort of simple form. It would just be on us to create it.
Yeah, templates are good.
Right.
Big fan of templates. All right, cool. So maybe I'll put this on the next agenda as well.
I think that makes sense.
Take it
Yeah.
there. All right, cool. And the only other thing I had was for, there's been a request for a letter of support for a land grant application that the city is pursuing. So I have some stuff I can pull up and share. Basically, it's for a property at the end of Reservation Road that abuts the Mount Tom State Reservation. And so it's a collection of 5 lots that totals to 5.5 acres. And so the city is seeking funding through the land grant to get funding to make the actual acquisition, and they're going to partner with CPA to get funding there. So together they'll have enough money to buy this this property, this collection of parcels. And the intent then in the future would be to put a conservation restriction on it, partnering with Kestrel Land Trust in that effort. So what they're seeking tonight would be just a letter of support from the commission saying, like, just generally that you guys like the idea of this effort. You're not giving them permission. You're not signing off on the conservation restriction as a document yet. You're not giving them permission to do anything. It's more just a show of support for the actual application for the land grant. So let me see if I can find it.
Cassie, has the CPA money been allocated yet, or is that still to come?
I did get an email from Jeff earlier today. Let me just double check.
Was that where they were looking to develop development houses?
Yeah, so there was let's see. The information I got with Jeff is that there was a proposal to develop these 5 lots as house lots. It's at the top of Reservation Road, and over 1,000 people signed a petition opposing that project to develop it as a housing lot. So maybe that's what you might have heard of it from there, Mike. Yep. Okay, yeah. Cool. And that whole area has been identified on the open space plan as a top priority for protection. One, because it's designated priority habitat. It's also, because it's abutting the already protected area of Mount Tom. It's like extra valuable in terms of creating more of a contiguous protected space.
Well, and if you've been up there, the gradient's like this.
Okay, so here's the other thing.
I mean, I can make a motion right now to support the project.
Well, has the commission done this before was my other question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the most recent one we did was for an MVP grant, action grant that the city was applying for. And it's just kind of showing like, yeah, this is a good idea. And this one's a little more relevant to the commission than others, is because I think once that land is acquired, it might come under the umbrella of the commission, but will probably be the management and monitoring of the property we delegated to Kestrel Land Trust, most likely. So yeah, do you want those exact numbers, Julie, from the CPA, or?
Did you say it has been allocated?
Yeah, Jeff said he secured a commitment from the CPA committee for 112,000. So.
Great. And do we know what the total acquisition is? What are they seeking in the grant?
They're going to acquire it. The total price of the land is $350,000, and then the land grant is for $228,000.
Okay.
So the majority is going to be coming from this land grant. Yeah.
Did they give us a draft letter that they want us to sign?
Yep, I can show that right now. Here we go. Yep, and so basically highlights the importance of the site as being important for conservation, potentially for passive recreation as well, just passive recreation, and then habitat protection.
Give everybody a minute to read.
Looks good to me. I make a motion to support the Reservation Road Land Grant application from the Conservation Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. August? Whittemore?
Aye.
Teffer?
Aye.
Motion passes. So Cassie, if you want to go ahead and sign on our behalf, that'd be great.
Okay, awesome. Otherwise, I think that was it for me in terms of things for this meeting. So, oh, I did have one other question. It was about, a project compliance update for the Nashawanic Pond. And just because I'd gotten some emails about it, so I just put up signs. They're going to be doing chemical treatment in Nashawanic Pond for milfoil. They have an order of conditions. It's all squared away. Got an extension recently, and it might have not been reflected on some previous agendas that it did get the extension, but it did, just within the compliance update part. So some people will notice that they posted the signs around the pond. We're going to have the pre-treatment meeting, as is required for pre-construction, on the order of conditions on the 14th. And I believe it's going to be either at 9 or 10 a.m. on the 14th. So I'll email you guys when I get that exact time. But that, just so that you all know that that's why that's going down. It's on my radar, and they've pretty much submitted everything they need. They had a question about the requirement of dissolved oxygen reports after treatment, because they said that they don't think they've ever, it's listed on the order of conditions. They don't know that they've ever done it before, and he's definitely willing to do it. He just didn't know if that was something that he still needed to do.
I think we have gotten them before.
He definitely did a pre-one. He's already submitted the pre-treatment for this month, for this year as well. So I got to look through the physical records and figure it out.
Take a look. I maybe that's what I'm thinking of, but I definitely remember getting DO reporting.
Yeah.
They do that regularly, or just before and after the milfoil treatments?
Well, it's only required for us as part of this order, that order of conditions that's about the treatment. I don't know if he has it. The guy who's the environmental monitor, Gary Gullis, he has all the equipment. He says he does it all the time. So I don't know with what frequency he does it for the pond, specifically for like the pond committee's data or not. Mm-hmm. That would be a question for him, but I can ask him at the pre-treatment meeting, just as a general question.
Yeah. I'm curious on what kind of data he has on the pond.
All right. Is there any other general business anyone wants to bring up? In that case, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. August?
Aye.
Whittemore?
Aye.
Teffer?
Aye.
Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned at 7:18 p.m. and will reconvene on July 26th at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Julie.